I'm Dan Drake. This is Front Up on Visitor Network TV and Channel 99. Our guest is Jeff Carlson, the director of the town's Department of Natural Resources.
Yes.
And welcome, Jeff.
Welcome. Glad to be back.
What we want to talk about today is erosion.
Sure.
And what the consequences of the storm were.
Oh, absolutely.
In terms of erosion all around the island, from what you know now. I don't know how much of it you've actually looked at, but...
Sure. Well, I'm one of the lucky souls that gets to go around and kind of explore both during the storm for areas of concern, and then also go around to areas post-storm and kind of do evaluations. And one of the nice programs that I participate in with my job is I participate in the Massachusetts Storm Reporter program, which is a program that Coastal Zone Management runs, and they assign sites and they ask and they go out, and it's all user-fed information where you document what you're seeing, what's been damaged, what hasn't been damaged. They ask you to upload photos. And it's a really good resource for them to collect a lot of information very quickly from people.
Is it open? Is it available to the public?
I think at some point it will be. I know they're kind of in a beta phase of it, but it's a great resource for us to get that into. A lot of those other photos, I think we're going to try to start to put up through our website, and we've just opened up our Natural Resources Facebook page. And then Jason Bridges at the town made us open up a Twitter account that we've just been starting to use. So I think going forward, we'll hopefully be able to tweet that out. And that's also something for us that anyone that sees storm damage, or especially in a storm like this, there's so many spots to get. If people have good photos or things that they can post to our Facebook page or email them in to us, it's always helpful for us to see.
What were those spots you checked during the storm?
So during the storm, obviously one of the spots that I always try to get out to is out in Sconset, and I like to check kind of from Low Beach through the bluff, kind of all the way up towards Hoyks Hollow Road. I didn't get all the way to Hoyks Hollow this time. The storm started to get too bad Tuesday morning, so I retreated back down Milestone before it became impassable. But then on Wednesday, we're back out. And then also during the storm, I also tried to check downtown as best possible, and then a couple spots up in like the Hinkley Lane area and stuff on the North Shore, just to kind of get a gauge for how each shore is functioning. And then I try to poke down to either the end of Hummock Pond Road or Manicat Road just to see what the conditions are like there, to kind of get a general gauge of what the four sides of the island are looking like as far as impacts to the coast.
So when you went back on Wednesday after the storm, what did you find?
A lot of good and a lot of bad. The South Shore, I was really surprised to see really took very little damage. It's always a concern for those, especially homes in the Sheep Pond Road area that are already in danger or in peril or up on cribbing, that they receive very little on the ends of the roads there. And public access is always a concern that they receive very little. So that was very good and very encouraging. And then that kind of carried around through Low Beach and into Codfish Park, even where there wasn't a really significant amount of erosion.
And down to Manicat as well?
Yep, and down to Manicat as well. And then obviously Manicat Harbor didn't have much. The areas that we saw the most erosion in, and kind of expected for the direction of the storm and the waves, were on the northern shore, so kind of from Hinkley Lane through Eel Point, and then obviously on the northeast and eastern facing shores, so kind of the Bluff and the Geo2 project area, that there was the most sand kind of taken and most sand moving during those storms, and obviously some washover events for Cascada and some things that were not unexpected. But
how long has it been since Cascada washed over?
Just a couple years ago, it actually washed over pretty briefly. Great Point separated in that same storm. I want to say that was the 2011 storm. I have to look back, but it happens on occasion, or you see it more with Sacajapon will get washover over its barrier beach area there, where it'll come into the pond. There's always a concern with that pond breaching in storms of that direction, but it didn't in this one. But it definitely received some water input over the top and in. But overall, the areas that we saw that were the hardest hit, other than obviously downtown and some of the areas through there, were definitely the eastern and northern shores, where there was a pretty significant amount of erosion.
What would you say on the North Shore, for example? A couple of feet?
Definitely, especially in certain spots. I know a lot of the private homes that are out there that have projects that have been permitted through the Concom, most of them lost all of their nourishment sand or mitigation material that's been placed down. A lot of them even saw erosion further up the bank above them. The waves were coming in and getting above. So I would say out there anywhere from a foot to 3 feet in some spots a little bit more, some spots a little bit less. And then looking comparatively on the eastern shore, obviously in front of the Geo2 project, it lost a pretty substantial portion of its nourishment sand in front of the project. And then we definitely saw some erosion on the toe of the slopes outside of the project areas. Nothing that caused the top to slump or slide, but again, it causes some oversteepening conditions. So sometimes those are concerns going forward when, if we get storms back to back, the bank is set up for a greater event or to replace that nourishment sand in front of those projects as quickly as possible. So if there is another storm, that there's material to supply to the north or south or east or west, depending on which shore you're on.
Did the geotubes out there do what they were supposed to do?
That's a good question. That's a question I've been getting a lot, and I'll give you my best. My best answer for that is, depending on how you want to view the geotubes, and not to
Right.
play sides with it, the top of the bank didn't move. So the end
It didn't on either side either.
So it did on either side, but we definitely saw some effects on the ends and up and down the coast a little bit, where we did see some erosion of that slope. How much of that is tied to that project is kind of yet to be determined in some surveying that's there. I know one of the areas of effect right on those tubes that we saw a little bit is those tubes end just short of the now famous Sconset clay knob that's there. And there was definitely a little bit of erosion that came around the end, some end effect that was there, but I think given the location, and it obviously didn't cause the top to slide, that I think a little bit of a bullet was dodged, and there wasn't anything more substantial. And that bluff as on a whole, without any real significant loss to the top, was pretty lucky for the severity and the duration of that storm.
I know that this is the sort of the $64 or $64 million question, but is it possible to have an opinion at this point as to whether the presence of the geotubes increased the erosion at either end?
I think that is the $64,000 question, and I think looking and trying to figure out how much sand left that system, how much sand needs to be replaced, obviously evaluating the condition of those geotubes, if they were punctured or leaking sand and providing extra sand that wasn't accounted for. It is tough to tell. I know when I go out to evaluate both during and post storms, certain things I look for are changes in where the water line is in relation to the tubes and to the rest of the bank, to see if it's come inland or moved back out. And one of the things I'm also very concerned with, and it's interesting that you could see during the storm really clearly, is really the lowering or raising of that beach. And during the storm, the beach lowered significantly, and you could even see further to the south where some of the older dune guard projects were, some of just the fencing projects where those posts have been snapped and buried for a long time, that
They were uncovered.
there was probably about 2 or 3 feet of those that had exposed, and then on Wednesday you could just see the tops, and then on Thursday they were pretty much gone. So that it changes a lot very quickly, and how much is there. So it's very tough to tell with the bare eye for how
What
much
causes
it's
the
doing.
beach to go down? Is it because it's not moving horizontally, if you will, it's moving out.
Sure. So it's just when the waves come in and those energy comes back off, at some point that energy is either reflected back or just by friction drags back as it recedes for that next wave and pulls. And with the intensity of those waves and the energy that's there, is you'll start to see that scours away. And that's one of the ways that the beach actually can try to protect itself and protect the bank, is it puts that sand into suspension in the water. And then the water, essentially becomes slower, and it's there, and it's kind of tumbling around and doing those
I hadn't
things.
thought of that, yeah.
That it actually can help to put it out there. So that's one of the reasons why you see beaches, and when we look at summer and winter beaches, that's why we see winter beaches where they look smaller, where they've steepened. Our wave energies are typically higher, they're coming in more, and then in the summer when we get our nice summer wave climate, those beaches will build out because that force isn't there to do it. And those beaches not just unsteepen, but that's when they flatten and they can accrete out a bit further.
And the sand settles, so to speak.
Yes,
Yeah.
so we get those nice big wide summer beaches that everyone loves, and in the winter they kind of pack in and get steep, and they hunker down themselves. It's pretty amazing that.
Did you ever
the
think you would
system
know
is set up.
as much about this as you do now?
Oh no, it's one of those
Stuff.
things. When I moved out here originally from Indiana, I was more of a plant and soils and birds and those things that. A lot of these coastal things has been a lot of learn by doing and a lot of experience and hands-on things, and it's I guess I've been lucky to have to be involved with a lot of these bigger projects, and you kind of learn. We have so many great consultants and resources that come out, or people that give presentations that are really so knowledgeable to soak all it in. It's just been great, and it's really helpful, and probably more than I deserve to know. But,
Do you think there is anything the town should be doing put aside Sconset for a moment, because that's a whole different issue tied up with a lot of complicated
Sure.
questions. But in other parts of the island, the North Shore, Sheep Pond, Matticat, and so forth, is there anything the town can do?
I do. And I think one of the things that was really helpful that came out of the storms a couple years ago and last year was finally completed is the town really took the time to buckle down and create a set of action items through their coastal management plan. And some of those things have been stepped through. We're really doing, I think, a better job at looking at some long-range planning things and some things that could happen. I guess I would use as a really good example and something that's starting to take place and some permitting that will come forward soon is just looking at the ends of Hummock Pond and Matticat Road where we've been having pavement go over in these storms and obviously creating an impact or even exacerbating water runoff by having an impervious surface there where we've started to kind of draw a line in the sand with, either jersey barriers or fencing, starting to peel back pavement. I know we'll be looking to replant some of those areas this year, so water coming down there that's getting channelized down the road has somewhere to go other than just over
and
and
been
eroding.
a big issue in Matticat. It's also created gullies and
Absolutely.
so
And
forth.
I think that's stuff we've started to do, and we've been identifying our areas of greatest concern. Obviously, infrastructure-wise, we have areas like the sewage treatment facility and the airport that are of great concern. And then one of the other projects that we've been working on, and Dave Franzuto has been really kind of the lead on this, is starting to look at things like the Easy Street bulkhead. Obviously, the FEMA maps and the flood zone have changed in the last year, and it's significantly higher in some spots that we can, work on those projects to raise those things. And I think that those projects are going to be coming forward and developing and doing those things. And the jetties are obviously getting ready to get some work and repair done as well. And I think all of those will go to help a bit.
Sorry, that's my phone, Gino.
I know who it is. It's for you guys upstairs. Hang on.
Is it? Yeah.
Just go ahead and just keep the conversation going.
Okay.
Keep going. As soon as the phone's off, you can ask that. Go back to a question. Oh, wait a minute.
Is he up?
Got it on? Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No problem. It happens. It
Forgot to
happens.
turn it.
Your popularity is just very high.
Well, no, I got some very unhappy news this morning. So my brother's very sick.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
So it may be somebody trying to reach me, but anyway. In terms of things that have been proposed in the past, such as the dumping of old subway cars off the beaches, is that a viable alternative? Obviously, there's a lot of preparatory work that would have to be done, and some
Absolutely.
community will that would have to be involved. But does that have merit?
Well, I think there's a lot of different projects that have been proposed that really have some merit and probably at least deserve some exploration and some thought about appropriate areas and permitting and those things that go through those. And just looking over time, whether it's, I know we've had the Joe Farrow proposals for barges and subway cars and those things, is what we're really looking at is something to attenuate wave energy, to prevent that wave energy from getting to shore and pulling it away. And if it's something that can certainly be, sized appropriately and cleaned out properly to make sure that what we're doing there, and more importantly, isn't going to have a real negative impact on the benthic communities that we have. I know Sconset, for example, has a really unique cobble habitat in Cobble Bottom that's off the shore that's an amazing ground for spawning fish and striped bass and black sea bass, that if we can avoid those impacts and still have something responsible out there, I think it's always worth a look and worth a discussion. And some of these things really relate to impacts that the community is willing to accept to the beaches or to the habitat. And that's really, those decisions have to come at a larger level.
That's great, and it's all interesting. Before you go, I have to ask you about something else, which
Sure.
is the discussion at the Selectmen's meeting workshop a couple of weeks ago about water quality and other aspects of the harbor. I'm sure that some of this work has been dumped on you in terms of making proposals and follow up and so forth. And how do you see that playing out?
I think it's great. I first off think it's great that we're finally really having a comprehensive discussion. We're not just looking at targeting, sewers the answer, fertilizers are the problem. No, it's more, now we're looking kind of at a more comprehensive approach, which I think is really great because now it's involved all these user groups that are having impacts to the harbor. And I think it's coming at a good time to have these where there's lots of projects in motion where, the Phase 2B downtown and the stormwater is really kind of taken hold, and Consu Springs is kind of gearing up again to do its work. I think
and the jetties project.
and the jetties
will have an
projects.
impact.
I think for our end, it's really helped us. We've been able to finally add our water quality specialist, who's been with us now for 2 weeks. And I know at tonight's selectmen meeting, Libby's going to give a little update. We had a sit down with some preliminary thoughts and objectives and real action items that we're looking at doing for water quality and eelgrass. I know some of the things our department is excited about doing is we're really going to take a time this year to really do some eelgrass mapping and some real solid aerial photograph interpretation and then ground truthing that goes with it to really quantify what
is ground truthing.
Ground truthing is when we have the areas and you can essentially make the map from the pictures where we think eelgrass is. Sometimes from those pictures that may be codium and maybe a different kind of seagrass and maybe algae mats that are on the bottom. But what it really involves is us putting the air tank on our back and getting in the water or using underwater video to ground truth specifically how those correspond to the photograph. So we know for sure that we have eelgrass where we're saying it is and the size and the quality and health that it is. And more importantly for us, when we go back to re-evaluate our areas in 2016, we know what we were starting with. So we know if we have a solid gain or loss. So that's an exciting project for us because that's how we're really going to start to quantify our other programs like fertilizer programs or working towards septic programs for the harbor watershed or enhancing those programs.
When do you think an action plan might be in place?
I think we're going to see it real soon. I know the selectmen want to put this on a real accelerated timetable for us, and I know the town manager, Libby, has been really on top of us to get her updates and information very quickly. I know we're going to be looking at new shellfish regulations that include some different management on how we're dredging for shellfish and how we're harvesting shellfish. I know those will hopefully be in front of the board the first meeting in March. I also know that the mooring and anchorage stuff is coming up soon, and that work group will hopefully be starting soon. And I know it's kind of their intention to really have a lot of these things or programs started or replaced in the next really 4 to 6 weeks from hopefully from tonight when we get some kind of final direction and instruction from the board that we'll hopefully have it out quickly because we're coming upon, fertilizer season starts in April. We want to have the class and licensing program enhanced and better enforcement for this season coming up then. So that's coming very quickly. Obviously our water quality testing season is also starting in April. So we have a really narrow time window to get all of this stuff put together. So I think having definitive plan of action and really solid points that we're going to be trying to tackle and how we're going to measure that is going to have to be coming together really quickly. So we'll hopefully see it very, very soon.
Great. Jeff Carlson, Director of the Department of Natural Resources for the town of Nantucket. Thank you very
Excellent.
much.
Thank you, Dan.